everyone. Welcome back to Coding from Null. I hope you learned a lot last week. It was a really fun week for me. We dug into how to actually connect our email to the MailChimp API and actually add it to an email list. So it was super fun. If you missed it, go back to last week, watch that video. This week, what we need to do is once our user has submitted their email, we want to notify them somehow, whether it's errored out or whether it's successfully been added to our list. We want to notify them either way, or even if they've already signed up for our list, we want to notify them about that as well. So today, all about notifications. This should be really fun. Let's start digging in. All right, so here we are where we left off last week, where we made our call out to the MailChimp API, and we're really not handling that email submission once it comes back. We were just console logging. If there's a result, if there's an error, whatever it is, just console log it. Now, obviously, that's not how we want to handle this. We want to send something back to our user telling them either the email submission went through, or maybe they're already a member of our list, or maybe there was some sort of error. Any of those sort of responses coming back, we want to then display that to the user. But really, before we do that, we kind of need to understand exactly what's coming back to us to begin with. Now, we could go through and we could spin up our server and our application, and we can just submit all the, permutations of what those states may be, error states, or, whether the submission went through or not. But an easier way to do that is using a tool called Postman, and that's what we'll be using today. So if you go and download this tool, I'll have a link in the description. This is basically what it looks like, and it allows you to send HTTP requests and see the responses. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with it, but Postman is really good for if you're making your own API or testing an existing API. This tool is just top notch. It makes things so much easier. So this is what we're going to be using, and I'll be going through kind of how we are going to test the MailChimp API to handle all those various states that we have. So the first thing that you want to do is we want to be submitting a post request. I went through this in the last tutorial, kind of touch on it again. Remember, a post request, for like security reasons, we're going to be sending information in the body of the HTTP request instead of something less secure where you'd be sending parameters in the URL string, which would be a GET request. So that's kind of the difference there between post and GET. So we want to do a post request, and this is the URL. This is straight out of the MailChimp API documentation. This US20 here would be when you have your API key, it'll have like a hyphen and then a US, or wherever you're accessing that API from. It'll have a little code on the end. Basically tells MailChimp where this particular request is originating from. So you want to plug that number in here. Mine's US20. Yours could or might be different. Then .api.mailchimp.com/3.0/lists/ this is your list ID /members. Now, if we look at our server request, we'll see we were using /lists/list ID/members, which is exactly the same here. This just takes care of tacking on the rest of this string for us that we didn't really have to worry about with the use of this MailChimp API v3 package that we were using. So this is the URL that we're going to be sending the request through. Now, we need a way to tag our API key and send it along with this request. And how we do that is in auth. So if you read the documentation for MailChimp, you can send your API key along with just basic auth, which basic auth is just using a username and a password. The username can be anything. I literally typed in anything here. You could type in whatever you want. The username it really doesn't matter in this instance. The password is going to be your API key itself. And then when you set up this auth, what you're going to see is in the headers, it's going to pass this authorization along in the header. You also want this content type application. This isn't really. It's like application /JSON. That's the content type that we're going to be sending through. So what to expect on the other side. And we also need to send the email address and the status along with it, just like we are doing in here. We're sending the email address that we want to add to our list, and then what the status is of that particular item. So there's a bunch of, if you want to dig into the MailChimp documentation, there's all sorts of things that you can have as status. Ours is just subscribed because we were just wanting to add someone as a new subscribed member. So how we do that is if you click on this little body guy here and then click on raw, and then here I think it's default to text. You want it as JSON. See this application /JSON, which matches our content type here. And you want to be passing a JSON object with both an email address and a status. Now, once we have this, I'm using just my email address, which I already know is on my MailChimp email list. So when I send that, and I'll send this again, we'll get this back from the request. And that's saying title, member exists, status 400, detail, this is already a list member, blah, 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 blah. So this is going to be really useful to us when we are looking at differentiating between whether the request came back and said, hey, in this instance, the member already exists, or other instances as well. So let's do something funny here. Let's send something that's obviously fake and see what the request or the response looks like coming back when we do this. So we'll type in test@test.com, which is obviously a fake email, and do a send. And we're still getting a status 400, invalid resource, and it's saying that this looks fake or invalid. So we know right away that we can't, if we're wanting to differentiate between someone already being on our mailing list and any sort of other error state, we can't really use that status because the status 400 is the same between both of these requests. So really, if we just wrote a catch-all for the errors as the status 400, we would never be able to tell our user whether they've already added to our email list or if there was some other funky error going on. So that's one thing to take notice of. Now let's type in a new email address, an address that we know is not on our mailing list right now. I will use something weird here. Let's see. I don't know. I'll just say John at coding from null.io. And let's go ahead and send that one along and see what happens. So when the request actually goes through, we get a whole ton of information back. We're getting the status, subscribed, we get like an ID number for this particular subscription, sending back us the same email address, and just a whole host of information here. And so this is really nice if we were going to be teasing it apart and we needed, some other stuff. This is really great. We really don't need a whole lot from this. We just wanted to see, hey, what does this look like when it's coming back? And now we know what it looks like when it's coming back. So now let's take a look at how we can, again, differentiate between these multiple requests. And doing that, let's go ahead and just pull back up our application here. So the first thing that I want to do here is add a new component that's going to be used to house the notification that we're going to be sending back to the user. So in our components folder, we'll just go new file, and we will just call this notification.js. And just make this a class component. And we got our div already here, which is exactly what we want. And so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be passing along an image that's going to basically show like a check mark, or we'll have like a exclamation point for error or something like that, and then a message to go along with it. And we also want to set the color of the notification as well. So we want our error state to be red, the warning state to be an orange, and success state to be the green color that we've been using throughout our application. So in this div, we are going to say class name equals, and we'll use backticks here, and it is going to be notification. So it'll always have the class name of notification, but then we also want to pass in another prop for the class name as well. And we'll call this level. So this.props.level. And the level will be, is this in warning state? Is this an error state? Is this a success state? That will be the level that we'll be passing along. And then we also want to know if this is going to be visible or not, because we don't want the message to be displaying the entire time. It's just going to pop up once they've submitted the email and then kind of drop away. And so this is going to say this.props.visible question mark. We'll say visible. Make sure there's a space here to separate the class names. And otherwise, just an empty string. So it'll be notification, and then whatever the level is, which will be either success, warning, danger, and then whether or not the notification is visible. And that will allow us to do some cool stuff with the CSS. Now inside of that, like I said, we want just a little image, say image, and then the source is going to equal this.props.source, and the alt will equal this.props.alt. And then we want a paragraph to display whatever the message is going to be. Whether, hey, thanks for your email submission, or there was an error, or whatever that message is going to be. This.props.message. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead. We haven't made this file yet, but let's go ahead and import the CSS here. We'll just say import /styles/notification.css. Now let's go ahead and create that style sheet. So in here, we'll go new file, notification.css, and let's start styling this here. So the first thing that we want to grab a hold of is just that notification itself, and just set some styles that are going to go through any sort of notification that we have. So we're going to set a nice border radius on this to match the rest of our application at 4 pixels. We're going to go ahead and display grid. We've been using that throughout the application. Again, give this a little bit of grid gap to kind of separate the image and the message that we're going to have displayed. We'll say grid column 1, -1, so that this spans the entire width of the grid that it's hosted in. Same with the row, so it'll extend both horizontally and vertically. 1, -1. We will set some grid template columns. This will be 1 FR and then 5 FR. And this will be, so the image will take up 1 fractional unit and then the message will take up 5 fractional units. And then we have a border. We'll just set this at 1 pixel, solid, and we'll just use our variable that we're using as black. We'll say position relative, set a transition, and that will be, say, 0.35 seconds, and transform, and this will be translate Y and 100%. So what this transform translate Y is going to do for us, it's going to hide the notification when our visibility basically is set to false. Because remember, up here we are passing along this prop that's going to say, hey, is this in the visible state or non-visible state? So when this is not visible, i.e. just this simple notification here, we are going to translate it on the y-axis by 100%, therefore hiding it behind some other elements on the page. So we'll kind of see how that works here in a little bit. Now we want to say, hey, when the notification is visible, we want to then transform and then translate Y 0. So when it's visible, go ahead and translate it back up, and then this little transition will kind of give us a little bit, or it just doesn't just pop up right away. It'll take 0.35 seconds for it to make that transition. Now we want to set what the color is going to be for each of the states that we sort of have for these notifications. So we have one that's going to be success, and when it's in success, we're going to set the background color, and we'll just use our green that we're using throughout the application. And in notification warning state, we'll use the background color bar -- orange, and then .notification.error, we want to set the background color to red. bar -- red. Perfect. Now we want to actually position how the image and the paragraph tag is going to be set inside the notification grid. So I'll just say .notification and then the image, and we will say justify self center, and then also align self center, which will just set it in the middle of its respective area of the notification, so it will be centered both vertically and horizontally. And then I'll just set a width on this as 40 pixels. And then we'll say dot notification, the paragraph, say color, so setting just the text color will be black. We will set the font weight at 500. Align this center. And then give it a little bit of padding on the right so it's not bumped up right against the image that we have. And we'll just give that 10 pixels. Okay. Now there's going to be a little bit of, I noticed when I was doing this before that on hover, it was getting some CSS from something else that we were doing from the, it gets it from when we hover over the form and we're setting the border color to the green. So to override that, I just specifically set the border color here on hover to black. Save, and that is it for the CSS for the notification. We've got how we're going to handle the visibility, whether the success warning or error state, and then also how the image and the paragraph is going to be aligned inside that notification. So now we got to think about where are we going to put this notification, where are we going to display it. So let's go ahead and look at the finished application here. And I'll go ahead and I'll just say test@test.com. See what so you see how it's popping up over the description and then hiding back down. So over the description is where we want our notification to be. So if we go into our application here, and let's go ahead and just close everything down here, and we want to go into the description. Now in the description right now we're only passing the text along, but we need to also pass along everything that we need for the notification as well. Actually, let's just go ahead and import the notification up here. Import notification from /notification. And remember all those props that we had there. We had the source, we had the alt, we had the message, we have visible, and we have the level. And so we have this class name description, this paragraph here, and then right below this is where we're going to put the notification. And we will just pass in those props. And what this is called is sort of like prop drilling. So we're passing the props to the description only to then pass those props then down to the notification. Alt is alt. We have message equals message, and then we have visible equals visible, and then level is going to equal level. So now what we need to do is work on passing these props down. And we only want to, well, we only want like we want the level and stuff to be able to change based on whatever we're receiving from that subscription request. So we kind of got to think about that for a second. Let's go ahead and go into the coming soon, our sort of top level component here, and let's look here and see what we need to add. So as we've done with everything else, let's go ahead and separate out what we're going to have here. We'll just set an initial state for that for the notification prompts that we're going to have. So let's go ahead and down here we'll just say notification, capital notification, and we have our source just being empty string, our alt be an empty string, our message will be an empty string, our level will also be an empty string, and then our visible will be a boolean. We'll set that to false because we want our notification to beginning just be false. We don't want it to be showing right away. We only want it to be showing if they've submitted something there. So then in here we will go destructure this and do notification, and then so remember we're prop drilling. We're passing that to describe. So for describe, we're going to set source is going to equal notification dot source, and then alt is going to equal notification dot alt, and then message notification dot message, level notification dot level, and then finally the visible equal to notification dot visible. Okay, so now we're passing everything along here. We need some way to set the notification parameters, right? We want to be able to set the level, we want to be able to set the visibility, we need to be able to set the message based on the error state. And how we're going to do that is with some functions. But where those functions need to be. So those functions are going to need to be in the coming soon component, because that's our like highest level component, because we need to get the information from subscribe into this description component. Well, these are sibling components, so in order to pass that information between, we need to have a function that's housed basically in the parent component of both of these that can then update the state and pass it along. So it sounds a little bit confusing, but let's go ahead and start looking into it. So the first one that we'll look at will be whether or not we are actually showing that that notification. So in here, I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in here and kind of go over it. I have this show notification function. It's going to destructure the notification out of the state, and it's going to say basically just set that notification visible to true. So, and we'll go through this in a little bit here. So it's going to say, hey, set the notification visible to true, and then we want to set a timeout for 3 seconds. And once that goes off, we want to set the visibility to false and then update state. So that's what's going to give us that nice little transition there where it shows us the notification for a few seconds, and then sets the visibility back to false, and then hides the notification again. So how do we pass this function as a prop? Up until now, we've been just passing in basically just passing in variables as props. And really, passing a function is no different. We just really got to think about what component is going to need that function. And that is going to be the subscribe, because the subscribe is going to know when that visibility needs to change, right? Because it's going to know when someone has actually submitted their email. So in here, we will just say show notification equals this dot show notification. And so we can pass that function down as a prop and then use it in the subscribe component. Now we also need another one, and this one's going to be a bit more complicated. We're going to need to configure that notification based on whatever level is coming in. So whether it's success, whether it's a warning, whether it's an error state, we need to know that, and we need to set both, hey, what is the image going to be, and also what is the message going to be, and what is the alternate text of that image going to be. So let's take a look at that one here. Let's go ahead and paste it in here. So we have another function called configure notification, and it's going to take in a level. So when our subscribe gets that request information back, it's going to decide what level this is, right? Based on, remember when we were using Postman and we were looking at how the requests were coming back? Well, when that when that response comes back, we need to look at that. We need to figure out, hey, is this success, warning, error? What state are we in? So we're going to send that level across. Same thing, we're going to destructure the notification out of state, and then we're going to set the level to this level being passed in, so whether it's success or warning, and then everything else is just going to be an error. Here we've got notification.source is going to be check. So this is actually just a checkmark SVG that I made. You can also get some SVGs, some really good ones from, I'll leave this in the description as well, but from the Noun project. If you're ever needing some sort of like little SVG is just like an icon or something, I would definitely suggest. I made these myself. I'm not going to go through how I made them and all that. We kind of went through that in an earlier video, kind of how to use Inkscape. But if you're making just something real simple like this, if I were to do it again, I'd probably just go to the Noun project and just download an SVG here. So up here, we just need to bring those in, and I will just say here, actually we already have a logo thing going on here. We'll just say import check from /images / check.svg and import, we'll say exclamation from / images / exclamation.svg, and then the same for the I called it the X mark, just an X saying hey, something's gone wrong here. Images and then X mark dot svg. That's good enough. And so along with that, we're pulling in that image from up here. We're setting that as the source. for the image for the notification. The alt will just be some alternate text to show in case the image doesn't show, and then what the message says. So for success, thanks for subscribing. For warning, we're just going to be handling whether that person is already submitted to our mailing list. So that's what this message says. And then anything else, we'll say, hey, there was some sort of issue. Please check your email and try again. And then at the end, we of course want to update set the state of that new updated notification with the level and whatever the source alt message and everything was done to it. So then that then passes it to description. So same thing with as show notification. We are also going to have configure notification and then pass that along here as well. Now let's go back into our subscribe component here and actually handle the request or response that's coming back, and then set the notification accordingly. So here, let's go ahead and let's just go ahead and delete all these. And instead, we're going to say .then, and then we will just say, we'll say response, and we'll say res.json. Okay. So take the response, parse it as JSON, and then with that JSON, we want to see what sort of response we're getting back. So we'll say if json.status equals subscribed. So if we look at our Postman stuff, so when we actually submitted one that went through, we get this status of subscribed that comes back. And so that's what we'll be checking for as our success metric. So if it's subscribed, we want to then say this .props .configure notification, and then pass in success. And then here we'll say else if the JSON.title equals remember this. So remember, we couldn't just say, hey, if the status coming back is 400, because it's basically giving us the same whether the person has already joined our email list or if there's some sort of error in there. But the difference was that the title said member exists, so that's what we'll be looking for. So if it says member exist, we will just say this .props .configure notification will be warning, and then we will just do a catch-all at the end, figuring that there is a some sort of error that happened. We'll say this .props .configure notification and set that to danger. And then at the end of all this, we want to then just show the notification. So remember that other function that we're passing along, which is show notification, and that doesn't take any arguments. And then we want to make sure that we just catch any errors here. So we'll just say .catch error, And then we'll just say console.log error. Now, after all this, we want to clear out the form. So when someone submitted their email, we don't want the email to just be sitting there. And how we do that, we'll just clean up the state. So in here, we'll just say this dot set state email is equal to an empty string. So I'm going to open up Explorer here. And what I'm doing here, I'm just setting that the images that we're using, I'm just going to be setting those up here. Again, I would strongly suggest just going to the Noun project and getting some cool images from there. I'm just copying these over from another project that I have. Just pasting them in here so I have those images. And I noticed that the naming convention that I used was different than I thought, so I'll have to fix that before it'll work. So I have X mark and check mark here. And so where was that at? Coming soon. We'll say this was check mark and this was X mark. Give that a save. Make sure that they are in my images folder. They're in there. So let's go ahead and just give this a whirl and see if it works. So the first thing that we want to do, remember, we want to start up our server. So inside our highest directory, we'll just do npm start to spin up that server, which listens on 9001. Here we go, express listening. Let's go ahead and open up another terminal, cd into client. Okay, and then once we're in client, go ahead and npm start. See how we're looking. So we do have something funky going on here. I can see it right away. We've got this border outline here that we don't want to be showing all the time, but let's go ahead and see if this actually works. We'll go test at test.com. So we're seeing some of it working. It's passing in our image here, I see. There's some other stuff going on here that we need to figure out. So I think our problem, really, by looking at it, is definitely a CSS issue. So we've got two sort of CSS things it might be. It might be in notification, what we've just done. It might also be in description. Now, the problem that we're seeing here is that we want that notification to be hidden. And how we do that is we're going to say overflow hidden. So when the element is overflown from description, we want to go ahead and hide that. And so that should hopefully hide it from us. If we go ahead and look at that again, it should be hidden now. And so let's go ahead and test this out again. Test at test.com. Submit. And we're still seeing it's coming up, but we're still having some trouble with that color. Like, why isn't that color coming through? Let's go ahead and start taking a look at that. I have a feeling that that is probably another CSS issue. So where do we have all our colors set up? So we have red, orange, and our green all set up here, which should be good. Let's go back into notification here. We're setting as success, warning, error. We're setting all those, so that looks good. So now I'm seeing what I messed up on here. So we were saying this level was actually set to danger, not error. So say danger and save. And go ahead and bring this back up. We'll say test at test.com. And perfect. We're seeing that come up just the way we want it. Having some, that image doesn't quite look right, because this is supposed to be align self, so it gets that horizontal and vertical centering. Test.com. There we go. Now we're looking good. And I would just go ahead and submit all the emails, make sure that they're all working. So if I say, okay, I know that this one is already on my mailing list, go ahead and give that one a go. I'm getting a nice little warning message. And then if I were to submit a new email, I should get that nice green that we have going on in our whole application. So we are looking real good. Set up that notification, got it nice and popping up to visible and then hiding away after a few seconds. We learned a lot about how to pass functions as props, and yeah, so I think we made a lot of progress today. I hope you guys learned a lot. I really enjoyed doing this one. Next week, what we will be focusing on is, right now, we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and submit another one here. And see, nothing's going on with our animation here, but if we go over to the production one and I do the same thing, we have this cool little like spin up on the gear, like it's like, hey, I'm doing something. And those sorts of like really small things can actually make things appear to the user like it's actually getting done faster, just because it's kind of showing them that the application is working on something, which is just kind of a really nice feature to add to stuff, and just a good thing for user experience sometimes. So that's what we'll be working on next week, is how do we speed up the animation of that gear. And so I hope that you'll all join me again next week, and I will see you then.